Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name's Luke, and I am honored to have coming back on for the second time on the show, UFC heavyweight fighter, Jared. Jared, welcome to the show. Jared Vanderaa, welcome to the show, Jared.
Thank you for having me.
It's very nice to have you on the show. I know we're having a little bit of connectivity issues, but hopefully we can still get the interview in. As a quick recap, you got into the UFC by an impressive ground and pound round one victory in Dana White Contender Series. We had you on the show just before that fight, which was in the fall of 2020. What was that experience like for you to show up on Dana White Contender Series and have such a big win?
There was moments of surrealness, like quiet. Like if you talk to other fighters that have gone Contender Series, quiet is maybe the first thing that comes to mind. Because even when I fought like later, like 2 months, 3 months later, when I fought Speedback, you heard more people rustling, doing shit. Like it wasn't as like a dead silent. Like Contender Series, you heard fucking nothing. You could hear a pin drop type of thing, like damn, silent. Fucking camera crew just quiet. Like all you heard is the click clack of my shoes. I'm just like, fuck, this is something else. But you know, went in there. I knew I had a change of opponent like 4 days prior. And that was, you know, like I decided to take it because it was important to take it. And I'm glad I took it because it got me to where I'm at today. So can't complain. You know, it was a fun fight. Try to make it quick. I'm glad I did because, you know, went home that night. And yeah, it's been good ever since.
Yes, indeed it has. You've had 3 fights in the UFC. You had a nice win over Justin Tafa, and probably even most exciting, the reason why you're on the show right now, we're honored to have you back on. It's really great having you back on the show to see somebody that got into the UFC through Dana White Contender Series. But on UFC 271, which is coming up February 12th, and a lot of people are talking about this one because this is the card that has Adesanya versus Whitaker 2, and the UFC is really pushing that. But you are fighting on that card against Andrei Arlovski, a former UFC heavyweight champ. That is quite the matchup for you in your 4th UFC fight, to be fighting a guy who has, think, to close to 20 UFC fights. What are your thoughts going into such a high-profile fight against a former champ?
I think stylistically, he's one of the. Please don't misconstrue the word easy. Easier stylistically fight for me. Because we talk about my 3 fights in the UFC. 2 of them have been against high-level grapplers and didn't go my way. I bear with striking, and that's why the Tafa fight went the way it did, because we both strikers, and I got to strike him. Now Arlovski, you know, he's a legend in his own right, but you know, being an old man in a young man's sport, you know, he's doing some shit right. So he's definitely a dangerous person, but I definitely think there's I have enough tools to beat him, and I also don't get the chance to not beat him because I'm scared of my coaches, what they're going to do to me in the long term than what Arlovski is going to possibly try to do to me in 15 minutes. So I'm a little bit more scared of my coaches than Arlovski. So the win is more on a necessary. Do I want my life a little bit better at home than 15 minutes in the cage? But no, I think fighting Arlovski is one of those fights that stylistically makes sense. Now I heard some people like, oh, you shouldn't be fighting him, blah 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 blah, because you know he's coming off a 2-fight win streak against I believe Chase and Carlos Felipe, which okay, fair enough. But I do, if he had maybe like the opponent I had, Romanov was what 15-0, 14-0 at the time.
14.
like I went in there and I was afraid to like go with him. It just, the dude's a stupidly good grappler, and I tried to like in this time from the Spivak fight to that fight, I try to like condense and get into my grappling a little bit more. And yeah, there's moments I stood up and I definitely brought it to him, but wasn't to that point. And with like when Arlovski, he did lose to Aspinall in air wrestling. Wrestling or not wrestling, like Aspinall took him down and was able to submit him. And with that being said, like, maybe if Arlovski fought the opponents that I've had,
Sure,
his streak would have been a little different. So I do think him and me fighting that out would be interesting. And, me beating Tafa, who fought Philippe, a lot of people thought Tafa won that fight. So having me and Arlovski kind of duke it out to see who really kind of won the fight.
sure.
Plays a factor into that too. And honestly, I think he was willing to take the short notice fight against me because I was actually supposed to fight on the last card, the 15th of January. But the opponent that they had me pulled out due to injury. They asked me, it's like, do you want to fight Arlovski? Yeah, sure. And both of our teams or whatever, people behind the scene of the punching and kicking were able to address the thing like, hey, do you guys want to fight in Texas? I'm like, fucking yeah, sure. Like, I could fight the 15th. I'll fight the 22nd. Anaheim. We'll go to Texas and do this. So here we are, prepping for this fight.
Well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit of that behind the scenes, both on your last fight falling through, having the opportunity to fight Arlovski. And I think it makes a lot of sense what you're pointing out, that you are a UFC fighter going into your fourth fight. If you see this as a good matchup because Arlovski's had so many fights in the UFC, what he's bringing to the table. Obviously, I think it's great that the UFC is giving you Arlovski. He's coming off 2 wins. You're coming off a loss, but like you said, it really comes down to your opponents you fought. So makes a lot of sense. It'll get a lot of eyes on you, which I think you're aware of, because even though Arlovski is no longer the fighter he used to be, you mentioned his age, and he's a former champ. Anytime a former champ is still fighting, people watch. Just like Junior Dos Santos, JDS had a lot of losses in a row before he retired, and they were still watching him because he was a former champ. So what do you think about people? You've already had eyes on you in Dana White Contender Series. Your 3 fights have all been entertaining heavyweight bouts. So what do you think about those extra eyes because you are fighting Arlovski? You say you match up well against him. So how excited are you to have people watching this fight to kind of see how Arlovski does and how you do against him?
To be honest, I really don't care so much about the eyes because, no matter what I do, like I do kind of have eyes on me, and I'll get the love and hate regardless of this winner. Regardless of the outcome of this fight, people are going to be like, "Oh, this happened, that happened." Hell, let's say I go to war. Let's say we go to the judges. Boom. Let's say I beat the shit out of them and I still lose. And I've fought in Texas. I've fought in Houston. And I don't care for those judges because I honestly believe that I beat the living shit out of a guy there. The only reason why I lost is because I got cut and bled. But I genuinely thought I won. Two of those was 3 rounds. The 3rd round, I do have to give it to him just because of the cut, and I slipped on a punch, but I popped the back up immediately. But I thought I was winning, and they gave it to him. So I'm just apprehensive on the judging. Well, with the eyes though, I'm like, no matter what I do, it's either gonna be right or wrong. Let's say I outstrike him like 1,000 to 2. I know that won't happen, but hypothetically, I was going to be some idiot going, "Oh, I don't see how you beat Arlovski. He's so much better than you." And I'm just like, 1,000 unanswered punches. Right. Okay. It's just, I already have the eyes on me,
Sure.
the one way or another. And sadly, I hate to say this, but the MMA community tends to be a little bit more toxic than other fan bases. I mean, because everyone knows how to fight without ever stepping into a ring and realizing that, you know, you could train and, you know, do technique all day long, but getting into a competition and stuff like that, there is a different beast to it. And just hearing a bunch of these guys just like, oh, you should have done this, or like I have like 10 messages right now on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter about, oh, how to beat Arlovski. And like, well, I do pay my coaches pay my coach on that same thing. Not only do I pay my coaches, I pay them to figure out the best way for me to beat Arlovski, not the way that you want. Like, people are like, just take Arlovski down and hug him to death. I'm like, where do you see me shooting all the fucking time? Because I don't. Like, do you see double legs coming from me? Yeah, if the opportunity arises, maybe. But I'm not going to be like, jab, jab, double leg. I'm not fucking Dan Henderson. I'm not going to throw a big over right hand, possibly knocking him out to a single leg. Sorry, not my jam.
Well, I appreciate you sharing about all of that. And it's kind of a heads up to people out there that know UFC fighters are really fighters at any level. Send them encouraging texts, you know, send them things that are positive, but don't tell them how to fight, because they have coaches and they have people that they're listening to. So like you said, it also shows some real maturity. You know, I appreciated last time we talked, which was a couple of years ago now, you share very open and honestly, and I think you're very mature in your mindset, knowing that the fight business is toxic in the sense that people hate you or love you depending on what your last fight was, and doesn't really matter how it goes. Like you said, you could outstrike somebody 1,000-2, and somebody would still have a problem with it. So I think you have a mature mindset, because you have to control what you do in there. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah. Here's an example of what happened, or like something like this. If you watch Saturday's main event, it was Giga Chikante versus Kelvin Cater. Now, great. There was one person, I don't know who, but they were tweeting out things. If you ever watch the fight, in the bottom left corner, you'll see, oh, this person, this, and then some person, oh, Giga won the first round. I'm like, fucking what? It's like, he had 2 minutes of great stand-up opportunity, but 3 minutes on his back. And I'm sorry, that's not. You have 3 minutes of lost control. You got taken down. Granted, yes, the taken down was off of a fucked up kick. I'm not saying that his stand-up wasn't looking, but to sit there and be like, oh, he still won? Fucking hell. Like, it does annoy me when people think that they fully understand everything. And now, granted, yes, there are biases in their fan bases. You no matter what, like I've had people talk good about me, and I'm just like, you're wrong. Like, I'm not this person. I like now, and that is something where we have to do. We also have to kind of consider, is people have their fan bases and stuff like that. That no matter what, you know, they always want to see their boy win. It just sometimes I'm just thinking to myself, like, maybe, just maybe, we can take a step back and not open our mouths and stuff like that. This is maybe why I also hate Twitter, just because I feel like there's a lot of open mouths suggesting and shouting out things, but no real, you know, into improving things. But that's just kind of my take on that whole thing. For some reason, I wanted to say this. If you want to show Sean Strickland support, especially after he wins against Jack Hermanson, send that dude a lot of fucking yaoi futa, hentai. He loves that shit.
Have you been training with Sean? Is that why you're sharing this information with us?
No, 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 no. What was it? About 2-3 months ago. So I'm a giant fucking like hardcore fucking otaku, like anime nerd,
Okay.
straight up. I posted something about anime gift box that I got, and this dude starts fucking roasting me, and he brings up some points where I don't, as a like a human being, I could at least have a conversation with him and we could talk about it. Now, and he brings some valid points to it. But some people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you hate anime, Strickland. How could you not like anime? And like the anime community is just as bad, maybe even worse than the anime community when it
Sure.
comes to this. But because I posted it, he starts roasting me and he doesn't tag me, but post my video and is like, what the fuck's wrong with people like this and stuff like that. So in turn, I just want people to send him fucking all that shit just to piss him off. And like the thing is that there's no bad like animosity between each other. We used to be training partners, and we're just like, this is how we bullshit. We bash on each other. Like I'm more into like the cult too. He's like a devout atheist, so we butt heads on that. But that's kind of how me and him, we butt heads, but there's that mutual respect for each other's different beliefs, where we don't like beat other people's down, beat each other down with it. We just talk shit just to talk shit between us.
I
So
guess that is interesting to see. Thanks for the advice. If anybody out there wants to annoy Sean Strickland, which could be a good idea if you're safely behind a keyboard. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend annoying you or Sean Strickland. But it is fun to see how former training partners can still have fun, even though you're no longer regularly training together. That is kind of a cool thing to see. I guess as this has been a great interview. I appreciate your willingness to come back on. It's fun to follow up with somebody before they were in the UFC to now that you're in the UFC and fighting for your fourth time in the UFC officially, because the Dana White Contender Series isn't officially UFC. What has it been like? If you just want to kind of wrap up and end on this, what has your whole UFC experience been like so far up to this point? Maybe something that you've always appreciated, because obviously we last talked before you were a UFC fighter. So what's kind of one thing that you've enjoyed or appreciated, or just your takeaway so far being an official UFC fighter now going into your fourth fight?
Phew. That one's a difficult one, because I like working with the UFC company as a whole, from their staff members. I enjoy like the people that I work with behind the scenes. The people that like really run the show are fucking amazing people. Like there's no one I have a bad thing to say. There's no one that has done me dirty. I have nothing but respect for the whole staff of the UFC, and to be running during what's going on. It's like that definitely is one thing I love working with, because I've been with other promotions, and there's a few promotions out there that have fucking nailed it, but none so much as the UFC. Like I know a lot of people are upset with the pay and stuff like that, but where I come from, or when you're starting out, you don't get paid a lot. Like a lot of people think that, oh, you're a fighter, you get paid all this money. It's like we don't. And then people are like comparing the UFC pay to the NFL pay. It's like, oh, the NFL makes let's say 500,000. Now I'm like, for starting, UFC makes 10 grand. I'm like, okay, like if we compare times and how many times they compete in a year, whereas we compete in a year, like a football game's what, 2.5, 3 hours long. You do the 18 games a year? Like,
Yeah, 17.
I might might compete 3 to 4 times a year. I'm like, we're not necessarily built the same. And I don't necessarily have so much problem with money. Well, I've all been a broke ass motherfucker all my life. So seeing money for the first time, I'm like, oh my God. But even then, you know, like I like working with the UFC, and I just really want to keep going forward with this company. And I mean, spite, you know, people on the outside, Jake Paul, screaming and shouting about how terrible the UFC pay is. It's annoying because he doesn't talk about the boxing pay scale. It's like, yeah, you know, you get some of these guys that make multi-millions and like hundreds of $1 million, like, which, okay, cool, but they don't talk about the prelim guys. A lot of the prelim guys fucking make jack shit. Some of them make less than fucking people opening up in the UFC, and you're going to sit there and be like, oh, boxing, we get hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm like, no, most boxers don't make hundreds of millions of dollars. Most of them barely crack over 20 grand sometimes. And you're going to sit there and blah, 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 blah. It's like, really talk about the real issues in boxing before you come over here and go, oh, MMA has all these fucking problems. It's like, yes, we have our problems. So does boxing. Stop acting like you know fucking that it's bad on this side. But like, I will say this. With all that being said, Jake Paul is a good businessman. As much as people hate to hear it, he got people talking about him. He gets people riled up, and his name everywhere. Right? And guess what? That's where he gets the money. He's great at causing that cycle. So, like, yeah, I spoke about him with you. Whoever hears it, it's like, oh, Jake Paul's brought up again. This is a smart business move. Isn't it? Yeah, like, oh, I'm going to defend MMA fighters. No, you're just kind of keeping yourself relevant.
Sure.
And honestly, like, if he, for whatever reason, gets into MMA and into the UFC, so many fucking eyes are going to be on Jake Paul.
Sure.
And he so much money off of that. So I'm just like, yeah, the dude's smart. I think he's just saying bullshit to just get people to focus on him.
Sure.
And I fucking hate it, but I'm like, I respect the game.
Well, it is really great, Jared, to get your perspective on your experience of working for the UFC. Obviously, you can only speak for your experience of the business side of the UFC. It's good to hear that it's been positive, that everybody behind the scenes, I think people forget they only see Joe Rogan and Dana White and a couple of the announcers, but they forget that there's so many people behind the scenes that make a bigger impact on fighters as far as your interactions and your day-to-day experience. So I'm glad to get your perspective on the experience. It's also nice to see you share a little bit about the culture, like, you know, Jake Paul kind of insulting MMA. That's all business. That's all part. That's the other way when you think about Conor several years ago insulting Floyd. It was all done for the same thing, to create buzz. It's been wonderful having you back on the show. I hope to continue to follow your career. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're just under a month away. So for everybody watching, UFC 271 going to be an incredible card. And obviously, Jared, you're going to be fighting on. I can't wait to see how that fight goes for you. Thanks again, and best skills to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Jared. Thanks, everybody, for watching. This has been Jared, the Mountain Vanderaa. Jared, thanks so much. Take care, buddy. All right, bud. Bye-bye.
You too.
You got it. All right, bye-bye.